Hello, everyone, and welcome to Now and Zen. This is our 35th episode, and we have Kraig Grady on today. How are you doing, Kraig?
Great, I'm doing great.
Great. Really, really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to
Uh,
be here.
I have just been immediately impressed by all of the instruments you've built and just how many of them there are, and how much it reminds me of Partch. You know,
Well,
what would you?
definitely my main influence, that's for sure.
Yeah, would you say that he inspired you to really start building and get into microtonality as well, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had met Ivor like some years before, and then I had met Herb just briefly, but then when I actually saw performance of Partch's U.S. Highball live, I was definitely totally impressed with it. You know, especially not only the way it sounded, but also how Partch used how people's movements became part of the piece. It was quite impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you draw on sort of his influence in a number of ways. Like when you're playing the meta-slendro vibraphone, you do that cool thing where you like sweep in the sound, and I've seen videos of Harry Partch doing that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you met Ivor Derrig. What was that like?
Ivor was, you know, he lived in this giant mess of a place. You know, it just talk about crowded. It was the most overly crowded place ever, and you know, he was a yeah. It was just, you know, he had a very kind of. It was almost like he had a very punk aesthetic.
Yeah.
You know, very messy and very crude and everything. I mean, admittedly, I was much more taken with Irv's work than at the time, and who was at that point was building the 19-tone clavichord with Scott Hackelman. So, yeah.
Right, and so that is a hexagonal clavichord, right? I think I've seen pictures of that. I've seen the diagrams, but maybe not pictures of the real thing. Can you maybe explain it a little bit to our listeners?
Oh, so yeah, so it was a 19-tone uh, keyboard with hexagonal keys set out in a generalized Bozanki pattern. Yeah,
Yeah,
but but the it actually it had a key where the one of the keys above was attached to a key below, so you could play like a um, you know, things above and below in two different places on the keyboard. Yeah.
I see. So it has a little bit of that design innovation like a Janko keyboard or an isomorphic keyboard would have, where everything isn't necessarily in a straight line.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So every major scale has exactly the same fingering and that, and so there were two of those made, and Scott has one, and I guess a Craig Huxley has the other one.
I saw some Klaxon Clouds videos on the music is just incredible. It's
Oh,
like
thanks.
these loud, well, these like kind of like soundscapes, and you really kind of have to be there to experience it. What would you say that listeners are missing out on if they don't attend the live experience of Clocks and Clouds or the live experience of uh, Anaphorian performances?
I would say that these instruments, they tend to produce a lot of like standing waves in the room, so it has the effect of a lot of times the sound will sound like it's coming from a different place, or a lot of times I'll get, you know, subtle buzzing right at the ears from difference tones that sometimes people are just, you know, it tends to pretty much engulf people pretty much. Yeah.
Right, so it's a much more visceral feeling than just having headphones on or just having speakers in a room because the space really like matters in your work then.
Yeah. There's something about having the sound only come out of two speakers doesn't quite seem to do it. Yeah.
Right, right, and maybe even I don't know, maybe even four wouldn't do it justice. There's just something about the instruments themselves and like the detail and the richness of the sound for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I've noticed that you use a lot of different tunings. Which tunings would you say you're most interested in, and how has that been affected by Irv's work?
Well, you know, I mean, when I met Irv, you know, I was quite taken by his material, and but kind of like one of the things that seemed to be missing was that there wasn't many compositions in any of his tunings. So
Right.
I pretty much have stayed focused on Irv's tunings, just because I feel like they need to be, explored and heard, because the one thing, looking at diagrams on paper, it just looks like mathematics, but they're actually, quite beautiful sounding things.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much how, you know, I think practically I've used nothing but Irv's tunings, except for there's one tuning of C chords that I've used.
George Secor, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard he passed away recently, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad. Yeah. Well, Irv Wilson's scales are really inspiring. What kinds of visual devices did Irv Wilson use in his diagrams and in his scales to really make sense of his own theories? Like what would you say Irv really like brought to the table in terms of scale construction? Because he had a lot of like new ideas.
Yeah, I think geometry was the thing that he used a lot. So he would use, and lattices. So he would use parallel lines to represent the same intervals, and so he would explore those, because he was always interested in how you could get the most out of the least amount of notes. I think with it, so the more compact structures you can make, the better it was for, I think, his way of thinking.
Yeah. Would you say that your thinking mirrors his thinking on that? Would you say your thinking lines up with his quite a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I worked with Irv for almost like 20 years, and knew him like 30 years. So yeah, so that he was definitely I started off taking lessons with him, and so that's so he be my teacher. I think I was pretty much very strongly influenced by his work. Yeah.
Wow. So were those composition lessons then, or were they music theory lessons?
They're mainly lessons on tuning. Basically, that's basically what they were about, and basically exploring those things. I think, um, I guess the way that Ur would look at each tuning, like each tuning was good for a particular type of thing. So so if I said, well, I'm interested in, you know, maybe not having the tonal center, but maybe I want more consonances without being so dissonant. So he would show me something like that, like his CPS's combination product sets theories, which basically are those type of things. Or
So what is a combination product set then?
well, that's where he takes the combination of he'll take, like, let's say he might take like four harmonics, and he'll take the combination of two at a time. And if he does that, he ends up with six different tones, which he calls as the hexany. But within these six tones, you can actually get eight different triads, four harmonic and four subharmonic. So that's like the simplest one of these type of structures. And the icosany, which had was a 3 out of 6 set, um, which is actually was a tuning that I worked with for like 15 years, and had like a big array of instruments. And unfortunately, when I moved here, I mean, these instruments are like, somewhat like the marimbas were like 8 feet long and stuff. I actually saved all the bars and resonators and left the frames, because it was just too much to move. But I haven't had the space to actually construct them back up again. Not the most practical thing. I mean, I guess the advantage that Partch had, there was, I think, room and space was much more available for cheap in his time, whereas that world is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how you would store all these instruments because are they well, they're stored at the Shadow Theater, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, where mine are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, most of mine are here. In this room, I have like quite a few. I guess you can't really see them, but I have like a marimba, a bass marimba, and
Oh, wow.
might have saw that my 37 tone instrument,
There
which
it
was
is,
a
the 37 tone. That's the video I'm watching. For our listeners, of
yes,
course we're on Zoom right now and Kraig
yes,
is showing us his cool instruments that are in the room with him. I also noticed that very cool similarity with sort of physical design of the instruments where like Harry Partch had the tonality diamond, but then with combination product sets, you're more selective with the harmonics or notes that you want to use, right? It's like taking subsets of that and using the geometrical shapes in a way that might just not be the tonality diamond, and they're reflected in the instruments themselves.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of the CPS kind of takes the same elements as Partch's diamond and then kind of like spreads it out more like in a donut as opposed to it's like centered onto a certain diamond. Yeah. Opens it up and turns it inside out in a way.
How would you say that affects your performance? Do you think it's easy to navigate? How do you like to navigate instruments linearly and visually?
Well, usually once I have the instruments made, and like I laid out all these percussion instruments in generalized patterns, and so I would use letter names. So after a while, I would think of them more like in relationships between different letters, more than math. So like
Yeah.
once it was all done, I tried to, not let the math, overwhelm me too much. Although there'd be certain patterns I would work out and I'd play through those patterns kind of like as etudes or just kind of training my ear as to what each one did. Yeah. It takes a long time, I think, to learn any tuning really well, I think, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And not only do you have, well, so many tunings, but then so many instruments to boot. So really you have to be quite a skilled multi-instrumentalist and have a wickedly good ear as well to really navigate that stuff.
I was quite influenced by Lou Harrison also. Like he impressed upon me that the his problem he had with Partch's music was that he had all these different instruments, but that they didn't really work together as an ensemble. So so he
Ah,
so he so he always encouraged me that he said don't design instruments, design ensembles.
I'm not sure what Lou Harrison means by that. I assume he means that Partch didn't design the instruments with the sort of pre-knowledge that they would all play together. But I mean, I don't know. It seems contrary to what I've learned. But maybe I don't quite understand what it means to be an ensemble as opposed to just a group of instruments.
I think it had to do with partially is how his stringed instruments are extremely soft compared
Yeah.
to his other instruments. So I think it's like the balance between the volume of instruments. I think had a big thing to do with it. And
Do you have any Do you have any stringed instruments then in Anaphoria?
I have a hammer dulcimer that I use, and I have a cymbalum that I needs repair. I actually have the strings, but it's unbelievably heavy, so I haven't strung it up lately. The
Yeah.
cymbalum is good because it's like piano. It's basically like a piano wire. It's basically a piano that you're playing with mallets, basically, and that's quite a bit of volume. The strings take up a lot of time tuning too, also beforehand. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I guess some of the instruments that you're using have really precise tuning, and then that's also really important in the situations you create with spatialization and beating sounds that are very visceral and in the room. Like do those have to be accurate for you, and how accurate and consistent do they have to be?
Well, I mean, the more accurate, the better. I've actually found, like, originally the original tuner I had to work with was a Motorola Scalatron tuner, like because of C chord. That was the best tuner available. So I had tuned instruments to those, and then and I was pretty satisfied with the sound. But then when I got a Peterson hardware tuner, which is good down to a tenth of a cent.
Woohoo!
Uh, I mean, it's like it's almost like the closer you get to exact, the more stronger it becomes in a weird way. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I've worked with there's a Oberheim made a synthesizer and a Marion after he sold Oberheim, and that has like 6,000 pitches in the octave. Or what's it do? It divides the I forget what it divides the semitone into. It's a ridiculously high number. But yeah, you can still kind of sense its accuracy. So I think I think the more accurate, the better. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that would be why, like Clocks and Clouds, when you perform, you usually perform with like vibraphones or mallets of some kind, and then Terumi has the like the wind organ, right? Generally, or
Yeah, the harmonium, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have notated music for that? How do you decide what to play and what to do?
Well, yeah, we have scores. We play off the scores, but because these instruments sound different in each room, so a lot of times, what happens is things. I guess like the duration of like sonorities aren't necessarily determined ahead of time. So
Oh,
there'll be like a sequence of things that we go through and patterns that we go through, but in each room, we change from one thing to another by cueing. So there's a certain amount of chance elements to these pieces.
okay.
Which also makes it a lot more fun for me to play. I mean, I think having to play something exactly the same every single time gets kind of stop paying attention on some other level.
Yeah, it almost becomes automatic or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah.
So do you and Terumi are you both composers writing for Clocks and Clouds or
I do most of the writing for Clocks and Clouds. She has a lot of input into it. Like she'll say uh, like uh, no, I don't like that sound there, or she'll make suggestions. So yeah, there's definitely a certain collaborative element there too. But yeah, she writes for other instruments also. Yeah.
Oh yeah, what kinds of instruments?
Oh, like there's been done work for like string quartets and electronics and two clarinets, and we both did a concert at the Sydney Opera House that included an ensemble Offspring did pieces of ours. So she's done that, yeah. Plus, she's done works with dancers and yeah, things like that.
And then you do like the shadow puppets in the shadow theater, right?
Yeah. That's probably like the most Partch influence thing of me is working with a live visual element. For I think when I first started working with different tunes, I was making silent films, and then I would do live soundtracks to those films. So I did that quite a bit for like 10 years, and then I don't know, I did one piece with a lot of people live, and I kind of enjoyed working with live actors and more than just a film. It's always like that. Like the film's always the same, So with theater, there's always a little variety.
It kind of goes back to that element of chance and being in the moment for something. Where if you've got a performance featuring live instruments, and there are lots of those elements, you're really like selling the experience more so than just the recorded sound.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. During the shadow plays, though, the everyone does everything, kind of like, which is another very Partch element of not being specialized. So
Right.
I can get a big ensemble sound too. Also, when someone's not doing operating a puppet, they'll either be doing lights or performing.
So how do the performances work? Because I know you have a lot of instruments, and I know that Anaphoria is a place where you've kind of created this interesting culture surrounding the instruments and regional songs and stuff like that. So who are these other performers who are playing, and when do they play, and how often do you play, and all of that stuff?
Well, I mean, sometimes even in Clocks and Clouds, there'll be added players. I would just not have any of those online. So some of those people are also involved in the shadow play also.
Yeah.
So I'll actually a lot of times the Clocks and Clouds, I'll actually work out compositions which I'll later use in shadow plays. During the shadow play, there's usually quite a few people playing instruments at a time. So there's usually it takes me a minimum of 6 people to do, and 3 months of rehearsal usually to do a shadow play. And so it's very time consuming, but
Well, of course, you differ from Partch in the fact that you use like a bunch of different tunings that are all Irv Wilson's. So it seems to me that it would be difficult to put all of these instruments together if if most of them are using different tunings. But maybe you can find some overlap, or maybe there are some instruments that I don't know about that actually have the same tuning. Are most of the instruments in like 1 or 2 or 3 tunings or something like that, or how does that work?
yeah, basically I have two ensembles. And so I have like the meta-slendro one, and I have the CPS one, and the CPS one is kind of stored away. So the only ensemble I have that I work with is the meta-slendro instruments. So, and they're all tuned at the same tuning. I mean, I have like some centaur instruments that I have that I do some work with Chris Abrams of the Necks, the band The Necks, and we do duos on those instruments. Yeah, when I did some of the films, I had the CPS instruments with the centaur tuning also, and then there was two different icosanies, and somehow that all worked together. But I prefer just having one tuning, you know. But like, so I have this 37 tone instrument, and then that's the meta-slendro tuning taken out to 37 places, and I have the rest are mainly 12 or 17 tone instruments, and they're like a subset of that. The 12 tone instruments are you know, very easy because I just notate it at like equal temperament.
Yeah.
So it's because people understand, you know, even so if I play it, I'll write D, even though the note will sound closer to D flat, for instance, or something. But yeah, it's kind of ended up that way. Not ideal. Like I said, I haven't really solved the. I mean, that's a big problem with Partch's scores. I don't know if you've tried to look at any of Partch's scores. You have to translate it into actual notes, and it takes a lot of work just to do that.
Oh yeah, I was talking to Charles Corey a little bit about that when he was at Untitled 2018, and he's very historical about it, and he's, you know, a Partch scholar, so it just seemed like a nightmare translating everything that Partch had done because of the numerous mistakes and inconsistencies and multiple formats, and just, you know, it's very, very hard to get all that really like worked up, especially his scores where there aren't any rhythms whatsoever, but maybe just like speech, and then the just ratios are there. So yeah,
very, very difficult. Well, I don't think that Partch maybe even foresaw that his music would be done past his lifetime. He did what he could with what he had, and he didn't really have, you know, that much support financially even when he was alive. I mean, you know, people like Betty Freeman gave money, but I think it was only like something like $5,000 a year. You know? As Alan Rich said, that basically covered his alcohol bill. You know. But that was, you know, he only had that support like on the last couple of years of his life. So.
You know, at Un12 we were talking about centaur tuning. Actually, I think we used it in 2016. Would you mind telling us what's so special about that tuning?
Well, it came about because I had a pump organ, and you know, and like the 80s, there wasn't really any synthesizer that could hold pitches stable, you know, because it was all the electric current, so you couldn't really do just intonation or anything. So I tried to come up with basically something that could sustain, you know, some simple ratios and for ear training, you know.
Right.
So, you know, yeah. So I had first done a 5 limit tuning, and after I did it, I go, no, this isn't enough. It's just too close to what I already had. So then I tuned, you know, came up with the 7 tone tuning, or 7 limit tuning, and you know, with combination of getting the harmonies, plus also I wanted to be able to get tetrachordal scales.
Right.
So that's pretty much how it came about. I've actually retuned 2 of the pitches on my 2 centaur instruments to 11 limit intervals now, so that I've actually, after all these years, actually changed the tuning, you know.
So does that still count as centaur, or is that centaur plus an extra note?
I call it centaura, is what I'm doing. It's like centaur with an A, you know. One of the things I like about just intonation is that it's never really closed. You can always add onto it, you know. One nice thing, and you can have different tunings that have lots of overlaps. You know, like I think centaur and Wilson CPS had something like 9 notes in common out of like 12. So
centaur is also a just intonation scale.
Yeah. So it becomes like a modular system. Yeah.
Do you use all unequal scales and just intonation?
Yes, yeah, pretty much. The very first instruments I started with though was 31 equal and a set of tubes that I made because that's what Urs had suggested, and it was at the time when the Falker School was going quite strong, and they were coming to the U.S. and touring. So he was promoting it because it seemed like it could turn into international movements. So,
Yeah.
So I met Anton de Beer and those people when they were there. There was a meeting at Webster College in St. Louis, a microtonal convention, where there were Blackwood was there and Ben Johnson was there, and Seeker was there with his organ, and a bunch of other people, and all the equal temperament people sat on the right side of the room, and all the just intonation people sat on the left side of the room.
Oh my god.
And me and Herb, we sat in the back,
Oh
at
yeah.
that point. So as not to really take sides, but I found that that's where I first met Ben Johnson, and so I think Ben pretty much talked me into working strictly in just intonation. So in 31 Equal, I was working with Urs Icosany, and I was very happy. But then I ended up tuning up a just version of the 31 tone scale. So I just said, no, I prefer the sound of this. So that's how it happened for me.
I've heard Ben Johnston just has that, or had that persuasive ability where after talking with him, you would want to work in just intonation.
He had some good arguments. He was a good speaker. I mean, at that point there had been a movie called Lady Sing the Blues with Diana Ross playing Billie Holiday, and that had come out. So he opened up his lecture. He said, the reason why Diana Ross failed at doing Billie Holiday was because she was singing the wrong intonation.
Ooh.
Very 12-tone oriented, but so he had a flair to his lectures.
I love it when people delve into the microtonality of like popular music. I think that's kind of cool. Even if they're not systematically using a scale that's very different, it's cool to see kind of like what people tend towards when they aren't thinking about that at all.
I mean, yeah, probably. I mean, like the thing I've noticed is like, especially if you take a cappella voice,
yeah,
and you look at you look at analysis of it, the singers don't stick to scales at all. They
right.
vary all over the place, quite much more than our, it kind of fools our ears, like it's really varied that much, but it doesn't, like some things it'll sound like a pentatonic and actually be like, 20 different pitches,
Yeah.
so that, yeah, I think, it's almost a shame that so even, I kind of think of scales as all scales are kind of like a compromise as to what we would probably do if we just did it by our ear.
It's kind of like that classic limitation you set on yourself if you're a composer and you're trying to draw from limited resources. And 12-tone equal temperament is already a limited resource, but then whichever other scale you kind of choose, you have to figure out limits within that system, whatever that may be. Even if you choose a system that's close to free pitch, you have to do something. So
Yeah.
So what is meta-slendro? We talked about centaur already. And did Jack Tickner use your meta-slendro scale on one of his guitars? I feel like he did, because I remember seeing it and I was like, oh, that's so uneven, because he had the fret and it was like right there.
Yeah, no, he was a student of Terumi's, and we did some classes. Me and Terumi did some classes on tuning, but Jack developed his own tuning, pretty much. Working. He likes to use 1411s as thirds. I think that and he likes to. So he won't use any fives or anything. But yeah, so he likes to pile those on.
Yeah. What a guy.
Very funny work. Yeah, great sense of humor. Yeah.
I think I saw something on your website where an Anaphorian citizen had redesigned a wind organ instrument so that the black and white keys were in a different pattern. And I think it was seven white keys and 10 white keys and 7 black keys.
Oh yeah,
because it's
yeah,
like a 7 large, 3 small pattern on the white keys, right?
Yeah, well, the meta-slendro is based on a recurrent sequence, which is kind of like the Fibonacci series.
Right.
So instead of like if the Fibonacci series is A, we look at it as A plus B equals C, where the pattern for meta-slendro is A plus B equals D. So you start with you just start with 1, 1, and 1, like 3 notes and then you just add 1 and 1 is 2, and 1 and 1 is 2, but then 1 and 2 is 3, and then it goes 5, 7, 9, 12, 16, and it keeps going up until it'll converge on a different irrational thing. But what happens is the difference tones of this tuning generate other pitches in the tuning, so it forms a consonance with itself.
How coincidental would that be?
Well, it'll be true of all recurrent sequences. Yeah, like the Fibonacci series, if you have like 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, 8 and 13 produce a difference tone of 5, and 5 and 8 produce a difference tone of 3. And then the combination tones will do the same thing. So it's the advantage of recurrent sequences. I actually prefer working in recurrent sequences more than simple low number just intonation. I actually find it, a better sound. And
can each recurrent sequence then be expressed as a horogram and or a scale tree pattern? Or am I conflating the ideas? Because I kind of think they might all be similar. Like you start with one note and then you're generating a scale sort of from a seed, and then you get all these possibilities, and it kind of like grows and flourishes like a plant and fills in its own gaps.
Yeah, that's true. The horograms though that Irv did are not recurrent sequences.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, those are basically fill-in. Those are kind of fill-in gaps in the Stern-Brokat tree, and that basically just charts out where so that where large, where the pentatonic would 3 larges and 2 smalls is in one area, and then 3 smalls and 2 larges in another area. So the horograms, but you could make a horogram for every one of the recurrent sequences, and it would have that infinite pattern where it goes around and each layer adds more and more.
Right, and it never truly closes.
Yeah.
Although it could get insanely close.
Yeah.
Well, how do you notate meta-slendro then?
Well, like I say, that because most of it's on 12-tone instruments, I just notated it as a normal 12-tone scale, because the main vibraphone is a 12-tone vibraphone, and the organ that Tarumi uses is a 12 tones.
May we hear the instruments?
I'll play some of the 37-tone instrument first.
Oh boy, I'm excited.
Yeah, so this is man. I think it took me 4 sets of 4 different sets of glockenspiels to make it.
So it's a very, very long instrument, is what Kraig is saying.
Yeah, it's like 3. It's like 9 feet, over 9 feet, I think. It might be like 10 feet or something at this point.
Wow.
I'll play one octave. Let's see how this start here. Kind of cheating there. It sounds like that.
Wow. I can't believe how easily I noticed that it was unequal.
Oh, I see. Well, you're probably more used to it than yeah, probably. I think when I went down, I kind of missed a few bars or something. But
the beating between adjacent bars is a lot of what you're using when you perform, right?
So this is the 12-tone subset of that. That's probably the main tuning I work with. Like that's like a 65, that's 64. So like that was very big. But one of the reasons why it's called meta-slendro is you can get it'll sound like slendro if you play it like this.
Wow, I think I actually get it. Because you've got that beating sound, the beating that happens from gamelan music.
Yeah.
You're actually creating separate scale degrees that you can use to create that effect with slendro-like steps.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's really nice too. I don't know how well I could try. I don't have the marimba set up at the moment because of room, but I do have the bass marimba, which in order to play, I kind of like Partch's bass marimba, you have to stand on a step in order to play it. But I'll play like the same type of. I don't know how well the low pitches will carry on recording, but
We'll have to see, I guess, won't we?
yeah.
Yeah. So with meta-slendro, the way you can use it for those particular beating effects, what kinds of situations do you want to use those in, and what kinds of situations do you leave them out, or do you always include them, or always tend to not include them? Like what's your strategy there with that kind of timbre?
Composition, I'll use. I'll work a lot with pentatonic scales,
Yeah.
and because like even though that you only have 12 pitches, that the scale is so almost like maximally uneven. If you transpose the same pentatonic to each key, it'll be quite different in sound.
Oh.
So if I have, let's say, if I have like I'll work with like 20 different pentatonic shapes, but then I have 12 different keys. So I actually have like 120 different pentatonics plus the different modes of each one of the 5 modes of those. So I actually have more material even with pentatonics than I can memorize in a lot of ways.
Right.
So that's and I think Lou Harrison I think was the one that got me working with pentatonics again. So
Right. Right. Since he was into gamelan music and all of that stuff.
yeah. They're good basic building blocks because like you can write a composition in one pentatonic that could last an hour. You can't do that so much easily with 4 notes or 3 notes. You could, but pentatonics are much easier, so it becomes like the basic thing. But I like to modulate quite a bit through these different ones. So sometimes sometimes the small pitches will appear, and sometimes they don't in these scales.
I find it very interesting that you have some pieces that are sort of, out of time, kind of like with an ambient feeling where you've just got these held notes and they're morphing, but then it's not necessarily always rooted like in the same tonic or whatever, just kind of moving wherever it wants to go.
Yeah. I try and I try and keep it moving. I actually don't like drone music that much. I like long sustained sounds, but I don't like to. Yeah, I find like I find the older I get, the drone music I find like it starts to hurt my ears after a while. Like get off that pitch.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting.
Yeah, so.
How does one create a bass marimba? I gather it's really, really hard to get the keys to be big enough and loud enough and low enough.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Those okay. I did not make the actual bars. I actually had um, someone in the UX actually made the bars for me. So the rest of it I made. I just made the stand and the resonators and that. But yeah, it's pretty hard to do a good job with wood. Wood's metal I can work with quite well. You know, it tends to be pretty uniform and everything. But wood tends to be very you know, not every piece of wood is different, and I don't have as good a feel for it as, let's say, Chris Forrester does, or
Right.
some of these other people.
For people who would want to start making their own instruments, what would you recommend they do? Like, how would you recommend they start learning about that?
I think like aluminum tubes are really good instruments, like in 60, 61 T3 metal, and it I don't have any in here. But it just loves to ring, you know. So and it's relatively cheap, and you can just basically you can use some math, but you basically cut anything you want a little bit longer than you want, and you just file it up to pitch.
Yeah.
And then it's good because it's stable. You know, it stays pretty much in tune.
Yeah, and it's soft, right? So easy to cut.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, and I think that's what Lou Harrison and Bill Kovic, actually, it was Bill that made most of the instruments that was, you know, who was actually kind of an underrated instrument builder. He did a pretty good job of using different aluminum shapes to imitate gamelan, the different gamelan sounds. So yeah.
I definitely want to talk about Anaphoria, but I don't know if you want to talk about something else because I'm curious about that whole situation and how it came about and what Irv thought of it. Uh,
Irv was not particularly happy about Anaphoria. I
really?
mean, yeah, no, he wasn't so much for the idea, but kind of, I think for me, it was like when I saw Partch's instruments and also listened to the sound, it was almost like hearing music from this other country or other culture, but
Yeah.
I couldn't really put my finger on it or anything. So so it made me think. So his music always made me think of a different place, and
Yeah.
so I think the idea was that, well, what would happen if I started with the place
Yeah.
and kind of designed it that way. I think at this point I kind of recognize that basically the Partch's place was the place where of his homelessness. Basically, it was the place of his homelessness. I was actually, and I find it's very interesting that both myself and Irv were both runaways in our teenage years, which I didn't find out to quite a much later. So I don't know if there's kind of like a the music and the instruments become kind of like one's home in a way. And I
Yeah.
think so. It kind of satisfies that, So, but the other thing I think about Partch's music is that it had its own country, but it also drew upon the music from all over the world. And I think that's something that's always kind of appealed to me. I had a world radio show in Los Angeles, and so I've always listened to a lot of world music, and it's still quite a bit of my inspiration for, if one wants to learn about intonation, then you can listen to what people are doing now, but you can also listen to what people have already done.
Do you have specific world music influences that you try to emulate in Anaphoria?
Well, I think meta-slendro inadvertently ends up sounding very gamelan-like, but I try not to use it the way that they do in Indonesia. Like, for instance, I'll let pitches ring, whereas they tend to damper sound. So I'll use much bigger sonorities, and I like to let it ring. And I don't even have dampers on these instruments. Figure if I want a short sound, I'll play it on a marimba. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Are there any actual citizens of Anaphoria? Are they like the ensemble members?
Yeah. And the different groups I've had over the years. Yeah, they're all members of Anaphoria. Yeah.
That's cool. So then, is Anaphoria? Is there any geography that's different besides the venues that the instruments are at? Like, is there like a place? I'm trying to piece it all together because I don't really understand it.
There's an actual map. I mean, unfortunately, you could see in the back wall there. I actually have a map of Anaphoria on the wall.
Oh, there it
which
is.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
which is on my website also, and so yeah. So yeah, that's the location. It is a map of an island, and so when people ask me where is Anaphoria, I always say it's 180 degrees from here. And people say, well, how come I can't find it on the map? I say it's because it's probably behind the logo. Whenever they put the logo on the map.
Wherever, yeah.
Yeah. So it's also been censored by Google, and so that's why, that's why you can't find it. It's censored it.
It's like you have your own lore as to how these scales would come about, like in a theoretical sort of like society with like Mount Meru and Pascal's triangle and the geometric shapes and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I find it, a fun way of working, and in the same way that like Partch would work with live instruments, I've actually tried to work with like the web presence, as part of the art too. I think that's part of the experience, and I like storytelling too.
When we had Hunter Ewan on, we were talking about the importance of storytelling in music and bringing lots of things to the musical environment, even though that might distract from the fact that music is music. It could also edify it in a way.
Yeah. Well, I like absolute music, but I tend to, I think most cultures music is not separated from theater or everything else. It's just one more element of our ritual. It's always encompasses other things going on. So I think that's been true of me too. I always have a hard time like composing just absolute music. I do it, but it's much like if I have a story. That's why I like about the shadow plays. Usually the stories will, like, oh, this is happening, so I'll do music that fits that.
Yeah.
So it forces me to do things that, like, if I just do an absolute music, I usually don't go to those same places. Yeah.
Right, I see. So the theatrical elements influence your compositional decisions.
Yeah. And I think Partch is basically he's a theater person. It's basically what he did was theater. Like there's actually a line in our toe, like a theater where he actually describes almost like Partch's instruments. I have it on my blog somewhere. That the instrument should be part of it, should be a part of the set, and the performer should be visible, playing the instruments, and these are all things that are toes that I think that Partch was influenced by.
Yeah, absolutely. With his whole idea of corporeal performance and having all of that there for people to see and to draw inspiration from during the performance.
Yeah.
It's been great talking. So this has been Kraig Grady. Are there any upcoming projects that you want to advertise and tell people about on Now and Zen?
Well, originally we were going to do a U.S. tour, but obviously we can't do that now.
Right. Yeah.
So that's been postponed. I'll have a CD coming out on a label called Another Timber, a British label, and that'll be coming out in September, October. And outside of that, I guess there's Anaphoria Bandcamp page for those who want to hear more music. I think I'll do it, and anaphoria.com.
Yeah.
As the website. That should do it, I think.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you very much. It's good to see a face too and a voice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great to meet you as well.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of Now and Zen. We hope this will give you something fun and exciting to listen to during quarantine. Our April episodes are Kraig Grady, James Mulvale, and Isaac Shankler. Our bonus episode this month features Elaine Walker, Brendan Burns, and Sevish in a chat together. By the way, our efforts to number the episodes according to equal temperaments, just intonation, tuning systems, or other related numbers appears to be more effort than it's worth. Thus, I've gone back through and renamed nearly all the episodes according to a standard episode number. This really makes things easier, and it doesn't feel like we're endlessly trying to come up with marginally related numbers that fit for episode titles. You, the patrons, voted on it, and that was a huge help. Here's a Patreon update. For those of you who are unaware, I, Stephen Weigel, have arranged Easily Blackwood's 15-tone equal-tempered etude for keyboard and played this on my YouTube channel. I plan to do this with all of the etudes, even the later ones which have so many notes. So the new rule is, for every 10 patrons I get, I will arrange a new etude. The next one on the chopping block is 13-tone equal temperament, and the next number to hit is the 30 patron mark. I know you want to hear this happen, so be a part of the rich history and cultural tradition of Blackwood's etudes by making a small monthly donation of only $5 or more if you feel so inclined. Donations are appreciated more than ever during this time period. I also greatly desire your feedback on this show and what kinds of content you want to see. If you're a patron, I listen to you more than other people. As always, this show wouldn't be possible without the generosity of our 23 patrons, our Zenharmonic patrons, as well as our Zenharmonic gods, Kit Dugay, Hector McGuffin, Joshua Sanchez, Christopher Bailey, Leland O. Weigel, Amy Coleman, Jill Weigel, Tina Harmon Carteau, and the Brass Whisperer. Catch you next time on Now and Zen. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Libsyn, and you can follow our social media on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks!